Now, the rest of the story.
Alright, welcome back. The hay saga continues. Well, this is the last of the tedding that I have to do for the second crop cutting that I've been working on. Now this stuff is actually pasture grass. This is out on, well, it is 15 acres spread out over 4 different grass fields, pastures at one point. This stuff actually looked terrible. It looked really thin when I went through and cut it. Like, it really didn't look like there was going to be much there. And then actually as it was coming out the back of the disc bind, it was, throwing it towards the center. It actually looked like it was starting to add up. Now I'm hoping for, really, that's all farmers really have sometimes is, let's just be hopeful. A lot of hope. But this stuff actually looks like it could yield maybe 30, 35 bales. 35 bales I think is being pretty generous. Now, this doesn't include a bunch of waterways and everything down at my place. I have approximately 7, maybe 8 acres of waterways and just a little bit of pasture down at my place, which that stuff is really tall. So granted, it might not be very many acres, but I think the tonnage, there's going to be quite a bit of material there. So the reason I'm going through and tedding this stuff out is because they're calling for rain. No, not because they're calling for rain. Is because it needs to be whipped out, is actually what I was just referred to it as today. I said I had to go out and ted, and the guy was at the farm, and he said, "You're going to go out and whip it." Well, all right, I guess we're going to whip some hay. So the windrows, I went out and actually checked it because we were just slightly wondering, because it was kind of light anyway. I mean, it looked like it was kind of heavy, but I went out and checked the windrows, and sure enough, because of how windrows usually work, the material that was down in the center of the pile, we'll just say, was still very wet. It was still really green. And you can see the stuff that I'm throwing out on the right. It really fluffed it up, lets the air hit it. The sun actually does a better job drying it out as opposed to it being a mat on the ground. This rhino tedder, which I think I have some shots of it, does a pretty nice job of actually ripping it up. The only thing is it depends on your speed and RPM. Say if you want to go a little bit slower and run the machine or the tractor at a lower RPM, you tend to leave windrows out the back of the tedder, because if you're only running it at, say, 1200 RPMs, it doesn't have the arms really moving fast enough where it actually, let's just go ahead and say, whipping it out. And what it does is it just kind of wants to pull it through the rotors, and it just kind of throws it and kind of tends to clump up more directly behind the machine. I was actually running it at 1500 RPM on the heavier stuff, and that was actually giving me better results. So it's definitely one of those things where you have to decide so much on how fast you want to go, and you got to choose your gear, because you have to pretty well keep your RPM constant as you're going across the field, or the pasture in this case. So looks kind of like a mean place. I don't know if you'd really want to stick your arm or your leg down in there. You'd end up with a broken something. Of course, as long as you're being farm safe, you don't ever get out of the machine when the power takeoff is running. But this gives you a pretty good idea about how it's throwing the material out the back at an angle, and I'd say it's a good 20-30 feet out behind the machine. So I mean, it does a nice job. It allows it to fluff it, I guess is one way to put it, because the hay actually, as long as it doesn't get rained on here, and it allows the sun and the wind and the heat that we're going to be having here actually work on that material, it'll make some really nice feed. At least that is the goal. This is supposed to be dry. That's what I'm aiming for, is dry bales that I can put inside. We have plenty of inside storage right now that we are not utilizing. I don't know if I know I haven't at this point, but Andrew is planning on going through and spraying fertilizer down, not on these pastures, but we have 45 acres of new seeding, plus It was alfalfa at one point. The alfalfa has all died off, and it's basically they're just grass fields. But between everything that Ryan has and Dad has, and we have about 45 acres that we're planning on getting at least a third cutting, and ideally at least hopefully maybe a fourth cutting in September if it doesn't get too late on us. It really depends on how the weather wants to work out. Rain hasn't been terrible. I mean, it's not like we're getting too much at this point, but the faucet hasn't completely shut off. Grandpa used to say that all the time. If you are hoping for the weather to do one thing or the other for too long, you'll typically get it. If you do it long enough or complain or wish for drier weather or wetter weather, the longer that you wish for it, the more likely you're going to get it, but not in the way that you want it. So if you're hoping for it to dry out, what'll end up happening is it's going to get too dry, and then you're going to find yourself wishing that it would start raining, which is pretty common for agriculture, isn't it? You want it to rain just enough to keep the crops happy, but not so much that you're going to have erosion, and you're going to be able to go out and make hay or do any other random jobs that you want to do. I mean, I don't know how much it really bothers other people around the country or around the world, but it is currently, well, we're coming up on the middle of July, and the summer's getting away from us. I'm one of the reasons why I don't listen to the radio, why I hardly watch regular satellite TV, if at all anymore, now that I think about it. I couldn't tell you the last time I've actually watched satellite TV anywhere, but I don't listen to most conventional media platforms anymore, just a little bit I got off my phone. But I imagine on some places they're already promoting back to school, and the problem is when you start talking back to school, once September 1st gets here and the schools open back up, then it's Christmas. So, I mean, Christmas is usually, I've seen them advertising December 25th in September and August, late August before. So it seems like the year's just when you're starting to get into your groove, I guess is the way to say it, and you're getting kind of comfortable with the warm weather, and the next thing you know, you're already looking down the barrel at fall. So we have Y dropping that needs to be done. They are fixing up to get that done here in the next few days. I'm hoping to get some footage of that best I can. But back to this tedder. Yes, it is a 4-rotor machine. I've heard people running 30 to 60 foot machines before. This is actually perfect for us. The reason being is because it is, I think, 18 feet wide. Just wide enough that it'll do our waterways, because our waterways are approximately 20 feet. So we can run through, hit all of our waterways, hit all of our pastures, and get through all of our narrow gateways and everything else with it folded down so we can, hit everything like we want to. A bigger machine really wouldn't do us any good, because I don't see us in the near future having anything more than 100 acres of hay in the foreseeable future. Maybe longer, mid to longer term, possibly, depends on how many cattle we get around here and how we get everything set up. The cattle numbers are increasing, or at least the plans are to increase the cattle numbers. I've actually been making a couple phone calls. I'm looking for some red Angus heifers. Haven't found anything yet, and to be completely honest with you, it might turn into amassing a bunch of available cash at the end of the season here, at the end of the year, and I might go through and just sit through a few cattle sales and see if any nice lots of red Angus heifers come through. So that's where all this haying equipment and everything comes in real handy. Yeah, I'm not sure what else you guys really want to see as far as the tedder goes. She needs to be put back away. It has been greased and everything else. I think we use it for a grand total of like 10 hours. You're able to cover a lot of ground with it really quick. I mean, for being what it is. The only problem is I try to keep from doing tillage with it. I said that, I think, last year. But yes, trying to keep from digging those teeth in the ground and you don't see dirt flying behind you, because parts break and parts are expensive. I don't want to replace too many teeth if we can avoid it. So, and it does a very awesome job for being what it is. I mean, there's not a whole lot of machine here, but I have a hard time imagining going back to not being able to ted our hay out. I mean, now that we've actually ran a tedder, because this is still part of the rhino deal, I'm probably going to have to go out and buy my own tedder or do something here in the next few years, because it seems like it's the only way you can get decent dry hay made, especially in southwest Wisconsin with our very touchy weather. I mean, the way things change on a dime, 20%, 10% chances of rain, can get really wet. I'm talking like up to an inch of rain on a 10 or 20% chance. So I haven't had to go through and re-ted out any windrows that I've already raked up. I would like to avoid that. That is also another great use that a machine like this would come into play for. But let's hope we can keep the quality up on this stuff. Hopefully. So they're not calling for much rain, if any. So that is enough for this video. That's enough for the whipping of the hay crop. Stay tuned for future videos. I got kind of a little bit of a backlog. I hope you guys will hang around to watch them. So until then, thanks for riding along. Take care. Take it easy. Keep in touch. I'll talk to you guys next time.